Some of my favorite memories of being a kid in the 80s and 90s was going to a local toy store or video game store or shopping mall and being able to browse the aisles full of video games, video game cases, or sections dedicated to a single console, grabbing the box off the shelf, looking at the back, looking at the pictures, reading the descriptions, and getting really excited about what game I might be able to buy and take home and play. This was an integral part to shopping for and experiencing our media back in these days, the 80s, the 90s, and even throughout the 2000s. Whether you're talking about video games or whether you're talking about picking up movies off of a shelf at a store or at a Blockbuster, to understand what it is and to also take it home and add it to your collection that you could take off of the shelf at any one time, put into your machine if it's a VHS, if it's a DVD player, if it was a Sega Genesis or a Nintendo 64. That was the brilliance and the beauty and the fun of being able to hold our physical video games and our media. And of course, nowadays, here at the end of 2024, it comes as no surprise to any of you that that's not the exact same world that we live in today. And yes, as an old man, a child of the 80s and 90s, as I just said, I certainly lament the fact that we don't live in the age, or at least the same age of physical media that we used to. And I really think it's part of what makes those older eras so much more fun and interesting and enjoyable compared to the way everything is put together nowadays, with so many experiences being reliant completely on being digital. So if you know me in person, or if you know me because you've been following maybe my channel here for a long time, or if you followed me on Twitter over the years, then you already know that I am a big believer and supporter of physical media. I'm always sharing pictures and discussing the new movies that I purchase on 4K or Blu-ray and the new video games that I purchase that I can hold in my hand. I think it's important that we keep this stuff alive. And sure, it's probably because I am an old man who was born in 1980 and I experienced those decades that I was just referencing. But even beyond nostalgia, I think that there are a lot of real-life, practical business and money-related reasons to believe in and to support physical media for as long as possible. Now, if we were to start to transfer this discussion to the meat of this video, which is actually talking about Nintendo and talking about video games and the future of physical media, I think it's important to recognize, and this is why I wanted to have this conversation in this video, I think it's important to recognize how, of all of the different companies out there, Limited Run not included, that's like its own spin-off company that is dedicated to keeping physical media alive in an interesting way, and I appreciate what they do and why they do what they do. So I do think there's a lot of value. I don't know much about that company. I don't like how long it takes to get their products, but it is what it is. So outside of Limited Run as their own enterprise, I'm talking about actual video game companies. This is why I think it's important to recognize that out of all of the companies nowadays, Nintendo really is the one company fighting the good fight, keeping the battle for physical media alive, not only through their own business decisions, but I think we also need to acknowledge that Nintendo fans and gamers on Nintendo platforms are also really big on supporting and continuing physical media, more so than it seems than Microsoft or Sony. And of course, I think right now, in mid-November of 2024, is also a good time to have this conversation around Nintendo's continued support and business models around physical media, and Nintendo fans and Switch players who continue to buy and support physical media ourselves as gamers and game fans, because we know that the Switch 2 is around the corner. We're, I would say, 5-6 months to maybe a year away from having a brand new Nintendo generation on the market. The Switch 2 could release sometime next summer or maybe next holiday. It's coming out sometime soon. We're going to see it sometime soon. And with Nintendo's next generation looming ahead of us, we get to wonder, will Nintendo continue to support and be a strong advocate for physical media? And will us, the gamers, and the Switch 2 gamers continue to support physical media with our dollars by buying and seeking out these physical versions of games on the Switch and on the Switch 2? I think so, and that's what makes Nintendo a really exciting prospect right now at the end of 2024, going into the reveal and eventual release of their next generation. So one thing I decided to do for this video is conduct a little experiment, and I posed the question to you guys out there who are Nintendo fans, people who own and play the Switch, and will of course be owning and playing on the Switch too, I wanted to know if you're a Switch player who collects and supports physical media, and if you plan to do the same when the Switch 2 releases. I asked you guys the question, both on my YouTube channel's community page, and also on Blue Sky, which is a new app that I've started using. I've kind of replaced Twitter with Blue Sky. It's a great app. There's no ads or bots or anything right now, so I definitely recommend using it, and even following me there, because I'm very active on it now. But on both of these places, I asked you guys, why do you buy and support physical media on the Switch, and why do you plan to do so on the Switch 2? And so I want to just read, just off the top of my head, a couple of quick responses from you guys, my community and followers, on why you do so. So here's a couple of responses that I got on Blue Sky. Alex says, sharing carts with family and friends has to be a big plus for me. Rayton Tomatoes says, in case a game gets delisted, which is a very good point. Liv says, everyone has similar points to me, but also just I hate not having something I own physically in my hands. It feels unrewarding to spend $60 on something I can't even literally hold. And I also just love the aspect of collection. I've also had issues sharing Switch games because of the way profiles work. And J2 Blue says, as long as it's available, I still plan on buying physical games for the foreseeable future. I personally just like having that feeling of opening up physical media. So these are some great responses, and they really encompass a lot of what I've saw, both on Blue Sky and on YouTube. And I'm going to read some YouTube comments from you guys as well in a minute. But there's a lot of shared feelings and sentiments across the board that everyone seems to feel and understand, and I feel a lot of those same ones as well. Sharing carts, I mean, hello, the ability to share video games goes back to the NES days, man, when we were lending our games to our friends and we were borrowing our friends' games because we didn't have the money to buy them. We were all kids relying on our parents and family to buy us video games. We didn't have disposable income. And so even today, and I even still do this, I actually recently lent one of my best buddies a PS5 game I had because he wanted to play it, and I was like, dude, I have it here, just take my disc. And so, you know, we can't forget that physical media does still exist for all three console platforms, but again, Nintendo seems to be supporting it more than the others, as well as Nintendo gamers, and so sharing is a big one. Of course, if a game gets delisted, stuff that's available online, that's a big one. Imagine if PT released physically, so that when Konami removed PT from the store and the ability to even play the freaking thing from your PS4, you still could continue to play it because you had a physical copy of PT for whatever reason they would have done that. I think that's another great point and advantage to physical media. And then both Liv and J2 Blue touched on a huge element that I just feel so much to my core, and it's why I buy my games and movies physically still. And it's not only the idea of collecting, but it's the idea of being able to just hold in your hand the thing you spent money on. I can't lie, it's always sat very weird to me that if I was to buy, especially a video game, because you're looking at $60 or $70, to spend that much money on something that's just a thumbnail on a piece of hardware that I just press X on to open up, it doesn't feel the same as being able to hold the actual product in my hand and display it almost as a reward, which I think is something Liv called it. It's almost like a reward. I spent $70 freaking dollars. I better be able to have that reward in my hand, always own it, always be able to put it in my machine and play it, no matter what they do on the back end. That's important to me. Online-only games not included. We're talking about mostly games that don't require an online connection. It's very important to do so. And I think that that's important going forward. I don't ever want to lose that, even on the Switch 2. So here are a couple of YouTube answers on why you guys collect physically for the Switch and plan to for the Switch 2 as well. The Terrible Claw 4285 says, I collect physical games because I like to have them in my personal possession, so I know they can't be taken away from me. Imagine in the future if everything was digital and just because someone at a company didn't like you for no explained reason, then they take all of the stuff away from you and you can't get it back. That's why I think physical games and physical stuff in general should stay permanently and not be considered outdated. I think there's a little bit of paranoia of you, the person, being targeted by a big company like Sony or Nintendo, which I don't think that would ever happen, but I think the larger idea of them just deciding they want to take something away, yeah, obviously, that's a huge fear I think we all have, and it's even already happened in the past. Tory Bobs says, I have over 210 physical Switch games, and I do it because I love to have them on a shelf like it's a little library of experiences, but I also do it for preservation reasons. After the Wii, 3DS, and Wii U went offline, I want to make sure I still have all of my favorite games. With the Switch 2, it's nice to know my digital games are safe for at least another generation though. We can't just count on it in the future if Nintendo makes a more unique console, like the Wii was, that is incompatible with current playstyles and control schemes. Speeding in the Mania is very straight to the point, nothing fancy, but I agree with the sentiment. Physical media will always be the best media. Switch 2 will be no exception for me. Another example of why a lot of people plan to buy physically on the Switch 2. Michael Caduck 1915 makes a really interesting point. Games are art. I collect them like I would put up a piece of my own artwork. I think that is a really great point and a really important perspective to have. Sideswipe 2615 says, yes, I hope to collect physically for Switch 2. I have a massive collection for Switch 1, and I'm glad that the Switch 2 has backwards compatibility for that reason. I agree with everyone else here that physical media is superior because you actually own it. You can let people borrow it, and when you're done, you can sell it. So between YouTube and Blue Sky and all of these comments and responses I read, like I mentioned, they really do encompass a lot of the wider points that most people said. So obviously there were, I had over 100 comments between both places and I couldn't read everybody's. But hopefully your general idea or sentiment was covered somewhere here. And I think it's important to understand why so many of us believe in physical media and why so many people, again, specifically on the Nintendo Switch and carrying into the Switch 2, plan to buy and support and keep physical media going. There's something I've just noticed surrounding Nintendo in the Switch era, how there's a lot more physical media support for the Switch than there is for the PS5 and for the Xbox Series X. And again, I have all three. I have a Switch, a PS5, and a Series X. I like them all. I'm still buying my physical games for all of them, but you can definitely just see in the ethosphere out there of the industry that Sony and Microsoft are pushing a lot more heavily towards digital media than Nintendo is. And, Nintendo does. They've got the eShop, and I think that the convenience of the Switch as a portable machine does help convince a lot of people to enjoy having digital collections, because the Switch might be something that they're more often than not playing portably, taking around wherever they go, and they don't want to carry games with them. So I understand that. But in a weird roundabout counteractive point, at the same time, Nintendo gamers, more than Sony and Microsoft, are also buying and supporting physical media. And so, yes, I'm recording this after Nintendo has confirmed that the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible. So it's very important to know that that statement helped let us all know that all of us who have physical Switch cartridges, just like someone here mentioned they have over 200 physical Switch cartridges, a lot of people do. Knowing the Switch 2 will be backwards compatible, our hundreds of physical Switch games are going to be able to play on the Switch 2. They're making the Switch 2 with a cartridge slot to plug our physical games into, and you better believe Nintendo will continue to support and make physical games for the Switch 2 in their next generation as well. And so I think the larger point I'm trying to get at with all of this rambling and all of these responses I'm reading from you guys here when talking about Nintendo and physical media in the future is that where we are currently with the PS5 and the Series X, and PC is just a forgotten soul. It's been digital only forever, and it's a shame to see, but it is what it is. But you look at the current state of Sony and Microsoft and where we expect them to go in their future. I mean, hell, the PS5 Pro just launched, and it's digital only. And Microsoft and Xbox continue to push Game Pass as opposed to physical games. But we're also now going into, like I've already said several times, the Switch 2 is coming to us sometime soon. We know it's going to support physical media, and Nintendo will continue to as well. I feel like I see a schism happening in the next, year to 18 months, where we're going to see Sony and Microsoft, they're already veering to the digital only side of things, and they want you to buy and play digital only, right? And support live service games more than ever. They're going to continue going even further this way, but I see the schism happening where Nintendo and the Switch 2 continue to veer more towards the physical side. And so we're going to see this split in the industry where more than half of the industry is going to go, in my opinion, the wrong direction. Forget this digital only stuff. Forget this subscription Game Pass crap. I mean, there's a good monetary value. I've never denied that, but it's just not good for the actual preservation of games and the ownership of games. So they're going to go the wrong direction. And I think Nintendo is going to continue for as long as possible. They're going to continue to try and be a bastion of physical games ownership and physical Switch cartridges and physical Switch 2 cartridges and whatever the hell happens after the Switch 2 in like 7 or 8 or 10 years. I think that Nintendo will continue to understand and recognize the importance of physical games. And if we as Nintendo gamers continue to buy and support physical games, that will continue to send the message to Nintendo that we want them to do so. And so I think Nintendo will be the place for those of us who love physical games and want to support and collect them and display them on our shelves and don't mind getting our asses off the couch to go and grab the cartridge we want and put it in the console to play it. Nintendo will say, we will be here for you with the Switch 2 and the Switch 3 and the schmoopity-doo, whatever they start to release in years down the road. That's the general thesis statement and message I'm trying to get at with my video, and I've noticed it, and with the Switch 2 coming and backwards compatibility just announced, and the questions I posed to you and the responses you guys gave me, I'm seeing evidence that that's where I think the future of gaming will go. These other guys are going to go the wrong direction, and I like the other guys. I still play on my PS5 more than I do my Switch or anything else, so I like them, but they're going to go the wrong direction for the art of gaming and the preservation of this art that I care about, whereas I think Nintendo is going to continue to go the right way. And I don't know if Nintendo is doing this because they've just been around longer than the other guys in the gaming space, and hopefully there's a level of integrity that they feel in supporting physical games, because they were making physical games in the 80s with the NES, through the SNES and the 64 and the GameCube and, you know, everything we know they've done. Even with like the Game Boy, right? And the Game Boy Advance and the DS family. They've always been the physical media champions going back to the 80s. And I'm hoping that they're just a company that doesn't ever want to let that go, and that they always want that to be a part of their identity. Maybe I'm being foolish, and maybe in 10 or 15 years, they're forced to just give in and start to go into the all-digital route. We don't know. And maybe it happens sooner than that. Maybe the Switch 2 will release with a physical supported version and a digital-only version. I hope they don't do that, but maybe they will. I don't know. Anyway, I just feel like Nintendo is trying to keep that alive. And so, as long as we, the gamers, per all of your guys' responses, continue to buy and support physical games for Nintendo, I think they will continue to be that place for us to go to know physical games will always be there to keep us comfortable, right? That's something I believe. These are my thoughts. Share your thoughts and responses below. And for now, that's about it.